for me, working from the office wasn't the deal. Like, I don't really need, the extra social circle in there, whatever. I got jujitsu, I got my buddies, but like everyone's different, So some people might really enjoy being in the office. They might enjoy the group of people they have in there. They might enjoy the whole routine. Everyone's different. I'm not like, trying to like talk bad or whatever about anyone who's like in that routine and isn't getting out of it, because it could be perfect for them. But I just know, it wasn't perfect for me. And sacrificing a little bit of money for, the happiness and ability to pursue some of the things I'm passionate about while I'm young, I think was a fair trade-off.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Breylor Grout. Breylor is a data analyst who's built his work lifestyle around his full-time competitive jiu-jitsu career. He was born and raised in San Diego and graduated from Cal Poly St. Louis Obispo in 2017 with a major in math and a minor in statistics. Since graduating, he's been putting in more and more time into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, where he's been training since 2010, but did not compete consistently until after he graduated from college. More recently, Breylor's won the IBJJF No-Gi brown belt pans and was featured on Who's Next, the Jiu Jitsu equivalent of The Ultimate Fighter. In this episode, we talk about how Breylor was able to find a role in analytics that matched his training schedule, the surprising similarities between jiu-jitsu and data analytics, and why maybe you should explore the sport in your free time. This was a special episode for me because I was able to combine two of my passions, data and jiu-jitsu. I love talking with Breylor, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Breylor, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. I actually recently saw you on Who's Next, which is a grappling, a reality show. And I found out there that you're a data analyst when you're not doing jiu-jitsu. And I wanted to have you on because I think there's so many interesting things between the two domains, data as well as jiu-jitsu, both of which I'm really passionate about. And I wanted to be able to bring you in to talk about some of your experience in both of those areas and maybe how they intersect at some point in your life.
For sure, man. Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it. So unfortunately, your intro to me wasn't my highlight reel of my jiu-jitsu career. It was an awesome opportunity getting out there on that Who's Next show. It's like I'm going out there, getting flown out to, stay in Austin for a week, compete against some of the best guys in the world for a shot at a big contract and some big matches coming up. That time, it didn't go my way in probably about the worst of ways, but it's all about a learning experience when that goes down. So luckily we came back, we rebounded. Things have been going all right lately. Took a lot of good lessons from that one. And yeah, man, we're here still doing jiu-jitsu, still doing data analysis.
Well, I love it. Something that I think it's really important to remember for everyone listening is that jiu-jitsu, data analytics, our jobs, it's not about the times that we lose or that we struggle. It's about the consistent resume that we built over time. And you have a fairly decorated jiu-jitsu resume at this point. And I think that's a testament. We can't hang an entire career on one decision. We hang an entire career on all of the different things that we've done and the resume that we built over time, because anything can happen in an individual project, in an individual match, in any of these types of things. So, I love that we've been able to talk offline about, how that is just maybe one bump in the road of this much bigger picture.
For sure. Yeah. It's all, people take things, many different ways. Of course, at the time I was really bummed about it. I just felt like this big old opportunity that I had just came and went and I squandered it, you probably saw my interview after the match when I got my loss. I was bummed, didn't really have much to say, but you can either harp on the past and, live in regret, or you can objectively look at what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Gather your thoughts and come back from there. So yeah, man, I agree. It's, anytime I've lost big in jiu-jitsu or, in my professional life, if I if I screw up on something, it's best to just not to get too emotional, look back objectively and, change for the future. So luckily I took some good lessons from that one, as I will in all future losses I have, because, no one's perfect. It's just going to happen again. So, we're ready.
Unless you're Hickson Gracie, I don't think.
Exactly. Hickson Gracie, maybe he's the exception, Khabib, he retired early, whatever,
Who knows?
I'm not retiring early. I'll stay around, so I'll take my L's.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get like to the very beginning of your origin story. I'm super interested every time I have a guest on where they first got interested in analytics and data. So to me, that's a really telling thing. Was this just a pivotal moment? Did something happen where you're like, wow, this is fascinating? Or was it a slow progression over time?
For sure. So just starting from the base up, all my life I've been a math guy. Like in elementary school and middle school, math came very naturally to me. Other things such as English, history, I didn't really have much of an interest in, and also I just wasn't good at learning it. So my parents are pretty analytical people as well, so I'm sure it's just in my DNA. So I've always came naturally to math, and then obviously going into college, in high school I was going through advanced math courses, got through them pretty easily, so I was like, okay, math, I guess I can handle it at a higher level. And so when it came time to choosing a college, basically, there was a number of colleges on my radar, and one of the so I ended up going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, you have to choose your major ahead of time. You can't go in there with an undecided major. So my whole reason for choosing San Luis Obispo actually ties back into the Jiu Jitsu element a little bit, because I've been a huge UFC and MMA fan for the past, maybe like 12, 13 years or so. And then I started Jiu Jitsu a few years after that. And, big Chuck Liddell fan, even though he was sort of before my time. And I knew that he trained over in San Luis Obispo. And he went to the gym over there called the Pit, Slow. And when I saw that and I liked Cal Poly, I liked the area, I was just like, okay, this seems like a good spot for me. Like, I want to go train. I was thinking I want to do MMA then, which maybe in the future I might. Right now it's not on my radar. But because of that, I had to choose my major ahead of time at Cal Poly. So I didn't know anything. I mean, I was young going into college. I was one of the kids who graduated high school at 17 and started, college at 17. Not that being 18 would make much of a difference, but I was young. I had no idea what direction my life would go, but I was like, okay, I'm good at math. I sort of want to train at the Pit. Let's just apply at Cal Poly as a math major. And then so I applied, did this early decision thing, ended up getting accepted to Cal Poly. And while I was there, side note, I never ended up training at the Pit San Luis Obispo. That place was sort of run down by the time I got there. So we'll get to that sector of things later. But so I applied to Cal Poly. I get accepted under a math major. I was like, okay, sweet. I'm good at math. This should be fine. And then after, the first year, I'm not really thinking about a job or anything yet. After the second year, you sort of start wondering like, okay, like what's going to happen after college? Like, what am I going to do? And there was one of those, there's an info session basically on a data scientist doing a presentation. And I didn't really go to many of those, presentations or whatever back in the day. I sort of would just go to class and go home and hang out, go train later in the day or kick it with my buddies. But for some reason I went to this one. Maybe they're giving away free pizza or something that probably enticed me. And so I went to this data science, presentation, and it just sort of spoke to me because I've always been the type of person to, I see something happen and I sort of want to know why it happened. Like I'll ask a bunch of questions when people tell me things that they probably like aren't sure why I'm asking, because I just want to know like the whole deal, So that's sort of the same in data science, obviously, when it comes down to it. It's like, okay, this event happened. Let's find all these, variables that led to it. Like what sticks out, what seems like it's meaningful to cause this to occur. So basically, that was the reason why I got my eye on data science initially. And then, started applying to some internships, ended up locking one down in LA for the summer after my junior year. And yeah, man, from there, ended up sticking with it. That's sort of what opened my eyes to data science, just not having any idea what to do. And then we saw it and I was like, okay, that seems like it's interesting. Let's give it a shot.
I really like that story. I think something that I found is a very common theme in a lot of the guests I interview is that people have a tremendous amount of success with almost a greedy algorithm when making decisions, right? It's like, okay, you pursued this college because at the moment everything lined up with where you wanted to train, the program that they had, the school, and it makes sense to make that decision there. Next,
Mm-hmm.
you're choosing this major, you're pursuing this path because wow, this speaks to me at this moment in time, and I can see how it lines up well for the future. I think
Yeah.
so many people think of all these different variables and hey, how is this going to work out for me? What are all of the options that I have right there? Sometimes the most efficient and most exciting way to approach something is just like saying, okay, what are the best options that I have right now? What do I like doing right now? And for some reason it's really easy to lose sight of the short term and what we're enjoying and what we want to spend time on. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, you did pursue an internship as you described, but it didn't seem like the best learning experience. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that was like for you?
Yeah, so luckily it was pretty cool, man, because at least going into it, it was a paid internship. So, being someone in college who I was just working part-time, thankfully, my parents were able to help me out with like, rent and all that stuff back then. I was, working just enough for spending money basically. And then when I saw that internship, so basically it wasn't one internship I had my eye on. Like anything, you sort of got to fail before you succeed. So it was getting close to the end of my junior year, and I was like, crap, I got to like get a head start. I can't, graduate college, have no experience in this area. So I spam applied to just so many interviews, to so many internships. And I probably applied to maybe 30, and I think I heard back from two, and then I got one of them. So, power in numbers. If I would have been bummed about the first 10 failures like there, I would have, I don't know, who knows, given up on it and just, been working at the pizza shop still or something. So instead of that, I, applied to a bunch of the interviews or internships. Once I got in there, like you're saying, it wasn't, so they promised $10,000 for a broke college kid. I was like, oh man, $10,000 for like 2.5 weeks. Let's go. So that was cool. That made it less painful to sit there. But when I was there, yeah, it just, they didn't really have me doing too much. I think it was one of these things where maybe some higher up wanted to create an internship, and the people who are, managing it weren't maybe as involved as they could have been to, set it up for a learning experience for me. I honestly like couldn't even tell you like one thing I learned like did that like technically there, other than like clicking through some Excel spreadsheets. So, and well, we did one team project, but it wasn't really related to data analysis, my portion at all. So I was sort of just paid to like, sit around and pretend like I'm doing something for like, 10 weeks, which is cool. I was paid, so I was happy. But luckily, even though it wasn't a great learning experience, it was points for the resume. So in the end, that helped out.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately there are a lot of internships like that,
Mm-hmm.
and for better or for worse, companies just still view that as experience, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
still rate that higher than your coursework or any of these other things. And it is so important to get that on your resume in general. Something I thought was really fascinating is the way you described your application process, where a lot of things went well. I mean, not well, right?
Mm-hmm.
You ran into a lot of failure, but you realize that was part of the process. Something I've seen is that people are really unaccustomed to failure based on the academic system that we're put in, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can go into a class and half the class in theory can get A's, right? It's very rare that you're failing regularly in just purely academics if you're a high performer. On the other hand, in sports, it's a very different thing. Like you go to the gym, you're getting your butt kicked every day. You're used to that getting beat down and you're used to recovering from it. For me in golf, when I was playing competitively, I'd go in and you know, I'm playing against 150 other people. The odds that I win a tournament is just very, very low. And I'm used to week in, week out, just getting beaten down, but still coming back and competing. And
Yeah.
it's, that's one of these areas where I think sport or doing something outside of the realm of academics to build some mental fortitude, I guess, can
Mm-hmm.
really help you in like the job market or in your career, because things don't always go according to plan, especially in the interview process. But even in your career, you run into issues, you run into algorithms or models not working how you expected them to. And I'm interested in sort of how you've felt that maybe jujitsu played into that of building that mental strength, or making these other things in your life seem like not that big a deal.
Yeah, that is a good point because, obviously, as you know, you train as well. It's like when you're getting started in jujitsu, you don't really have much to offer these guys, unless it's a beginner, then it's just going to be like a too scrappy, like freaking cats fighting in the street or something. No one knows what they're doing, but just going crazy, which, obviously be careful in those situations. Don't want to get hurt. But you're used to getting beat down. So you realize that it just takes a lot of repetitions to get things, done the right way. At that point in my life, I probably wasn't, maybe tweaking my resume or like taking what I could from like these failed attempts and like using it to better myself to get a better shot at getting the job. I wasn't taking those extra steps, which if I would have, maybe it would have taken less than, 30 applications, but still, like you're saying, at least the mental fortitude of like just the unwillingness to give up. Like that's crucial, especially in this day and age where to apply to things is mostly online, and it's pretty hard to differentiate yourself from other just documents, doc files flying in. It's like, okay, everyone sort of looks the same, they got different experience, but yeah, it's just it's just the willingness to keep trying. Yeah, I've got some of my buddies trying to like get another job, and they'll give it a few applications, and then they miss one interview, or they fail one interview and the guys don't want them and they sort of give up. But I'm like, just keep throwing them out there. It's powers and numbers.
Absolutely. There's a very data centric philosophy associated with that, right? It is in some sense a numbers game. There are things you can do to improve your odds, like tweaking your resume, whatever it might be, but you have to get volume in order to have some success on that domain, on that front.
For
I'm
sure.
also very interested in your more recent job. So after your internship, you landed a position, and then more recently you've changed positions, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So out of college, well, actually, so I forgot to mention I had another slight internship. When was it? It was maybe just for like 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, like during my senior year when I was back for winter break. So it was something very minor, which got me a little more data savvy. I like at least understood like what SQL was, like sort of understanding like what goes on here. So that knowledge also sort of helped then to land my first job, where I was a junior business and technology analyst, as they called it, at Axos Bank
It's a
in San
mouthful.
Diego. Yeah, yeah. So it's just like it's a fancy title for a data analyst, basically. They just name it a little different. And so that was, a standard office job where, I had to throw on my college shirt, wear the slacks every day going in there. And yeah, it was good, man. It was a really good learning experience because there they actually built me up into like a baseline, data analyst to start, like, just simple stuff, pulling data using SQL, like, creating summaries, like, creating reports in Tableau or SSRS and things like that. And that really got my, footing going in the data analyst world. And so that job lasted me maybe a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years, somewhere around there. But I think, as I mentioned it to you before, I love doing jujitsu. I sort of love, I'm born and raised in San Diego. So, I like cruising outside, sort of a little bit of freedom, just being able to do what I want. And for me personally, just being in the office environment wasn't really like my place to be, I think, because I also am a fast worker. So, I'd get my work done maybe in like 5 hours and like finding, time to kill otherwise or something. And, I just sort of felt like it just wasn't, my life wasn't like as efficient as it could have been, like I could have been doing a little more in the jujitsu sense of things. And also maybe like my free time outside of the work during those work hours. So that led me to realize that maybe I shouldn't work in an office, maybe working from home would be better for me because a lot of times these, higher level jujitsu training sessions are in the middle of the day rather than way later on in the day. And also, you're sort of tired later in the day after working for 8 or 9 hours, and come in and trying to train. It just wasn't like, I just wasn't progressing to where I wanted. So again, went through the pipeline, probably applied to like 30 or 40 work from home data analyst positions because I was like, okay, let me just get some freedom. And then, a couple of them stick. And luckily, one of them that I landed with is now my current job still. I've stuck with it for a little over 2 years, maybe like 2.5. I don't even know. I've lost track at this point. It's been a while. But so now I work from home. I leverage my experience in the data analysis sector to get a job where I can work more on my own schedule and doing a higher level of work. So through that, pre-pandemic, before it was cool, I started working from home and still doing it. Yeah, now I wake up in the morning. I'm sort of on my own schedule, don't have to sit in traffic. I'll drive to go train around 11 or so each day, come back at 2, and yeah, I got a lot more it's a lot more fun for me personally. Everyone's different. I like structuring my day that way.
I think there's something really important about finding the role that is the best fit for you. So many people who I talk to, including myself, they make all of their work, their life revolves around their work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it obviously doesn't have to be that way. There can be other things in our lives that are just as important, if not more important, than our work. Some
Mm-hmm.
people work to live, some people live to work, and there is a balance in between there. It seems like, and it's obvious that Jiu Jitsu is a huge part of your life. You're doing that competitively. You're traveling for that. You're doing all these things, and your role and the specific data work is something that fits really nicely into that lifestyle. And a lot of the time, that's all you need to get from work, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's to me such a beautiful thing, and a sort of flexible thing about this career path is that you have the power to find a lot of positions. You have a lot of opportunity, so that if you did want to make your work something stable and consistent and something that you enjoy, but isn't necessarily like the center of your life, you have the
Mm-hmm.
power to do that. And that's essentially what I've done with my career. I work my like quote unquote 9 to 5 where I'm remote, and then I do
Mm-hmm.
content on the side, the podcast, YouTube, all these different things. And I have the ability to focus on those two things equally, or give them as much time as I need. And for you, that gap would be filled obviously with a lot of training.
Yeah.
So I really admire the fact that you've identified that. You've thought about, okay, how do these things coexist? How do I find it might be the ideal career for your to practice jujitsu and to train as well. But there could be something better, who knows? But it
Mm-hmm.
seems like you found this really interesting synergy there. How did you go about making that leap? Like, what was the thought process where you're like, oh, remote is a viable option, I have enough skill to do that now? Like, what was the linchpin that made you get to that decision?
Yeah. So, man, it's funny because I've never been someone in my life to, get like anxiety or anything like that too much. Like I'm generally, positive, upbeat person. Obviously everyone has their, days and stuff like that. But towards like the end of myself working in the bank, like it was weird, man. I don't know. I was just like not enjoying sitting there, like driving there each day. I was sort of just like having just like weird freaking feelings inside of myself. Like that sort of led me to get into things more so, which I've been slacking on lately, unfortunately, but like meditating and things like that, because like it would just be like a few hours into the day and I knew I had like 6 more hours or 5 more. And like, I just wasn't really feeling it. So I just like run out to the car and like, it was weird, man, like just not feeling great. So I just realized, okay, something has to change. Like this isn't the spot for me. And I did a few sessions where if I didn't have my manager having me do something in the middle of the day, that I could run out and really quickly run to this other school I was training at noon, get a quick workout in, get a quick shower and rush back and like getting lunch on the way. But it was a very rushed process, it was like in and out, like go, go, go. And then so after doing that like a couple of times, I was like, man, maybe I got to get a job where like I can just do this without having to stress about it, where it can be a regular thing. And yeah, I've always been the type of person too, like in college, some people go and work in the library for their homework, or some people, go and work with like groups of people for this or that. I've always just sort of been good at like going into my room and shutting my door and just getting it done, by myself, focusing in. So that just sort of like all those factors led me to believe, I was like, man, maybe if I could find a job where like I could work from home, like that would be ideal. And also my manager had the ability to work from home, which he wouldn't do much, but if he was sick, he'd be doing it. And so like that was in my head. I was like, man, if he can work from home, like why can't I just do all this stuff from home? Like why do I have to drive in here? And
Yeah.
so that all those things basically just led me to like Google searching in my freaking 4 extra hours a day sitting in that office. Unfortunately, don't tell my old company that. It was sort of maybe on company
I think
time looking for a
everyone's
new
done
job.
that.
Yeah. It's like, is my manager looking over my shoulder? I hope not. But yeah, no. So I was just like went on all these work from home websites and started sending out the applications, man. Just had to switch something up.
Yeah. I think again, just so many people don't realize that you have a lot of freedom in the career that you choose. And there's
Mm-hmm.
benefits and drawbacks to everything. So, I chose a career path. I chose the current company that I work at. I took a pretty big pay cut from what I would make at like a big tech company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of freedom that I have, the amount of autonomy and control over the project and workflow is unprecedented. And I can do all the content creation, all these other things, right?
Yeah.
The trade off of pure income comes with the benefit of all of these other opportunities. And, sometimes you don't even have to take a pay cut, but like it's really important to think about what you value in a role, which might not even be purely financial, right? I mean, it could be this freedom. And, if I'm making money from the content that I produce, it's like, oh, I don't need to make all my money from my work. I can make money
Yeah.
from these other sources, right? It's a very empowering thing to be able to realize that exactly this role fits better than some of these
For
other
sure,
roles.
man. And it's funny too, because I haven't even brought up like the whole concept of, money yet in this whole discussion. So, I mean, obviously we all want money. We all want to be successful. We want to get the things we want, but it's like, I could have probably like, instead of getting this job that I have now, I probably could have taken a job and maybe made like 30-40% more or something, which obviously like is, it's like tempting, but I just don't really see the point in, working for all this money if you're just not enjoying day to day life. Like, uh, and it's funny I say that because sort of right now I'm in a grind focusing on a lot of things where I don't have quite as much free time, but it's sort of more so for the future, but it's all things I do enjoy. But if you're just like, you know, say you're making like 500,000 bucks a year, but you're driving there and you're freaking not liking the drive.
Hating
You're in
every
a bummed
second.
mood every day. Like, what's the point? I don't know. And and also like touching it back a little bit. It's like for me, working from the office wasn't the deal. Like, I don't really need the extra social circle in there, whatever. I got jujitsu, I got my buddies, but like everyone's different. So some people might really enjoy being in the office. They might enjoy the group of people they have in there. They might enjoy the whole routine. Everyone's different. I'm not like, trying to like talk bad or whatever about anyone who's like in that routine and isn't getting out of it, because it could be perfect for them. But I just know, yeah, it wasn't perfect for me. And sacrificing a little bit of money for, the happiness and ability to pursue some of the things I'm passionate about while I'm young, I think was a fair trade off. And currently I'm working towards other, income streams as well. So hopefully that'll come too. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned fair trade off, and I think that that's the most important thing. I mean, some people I know, they're like, hey, I just want to make a lot of money. I still
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the technical work that I'm doing. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Like, in some sense, I'm like, damn, I wish I could enjoy that type of work as much as you are and get paid in that same way. But for me, it's just like, hey, I would be totally miserable if I was approaching it in the same way. And that's the beauty of sort of introspection is the understanding that, hey, I'm different from these other people, and I found the system and the setup that works for me. i
Mm-hmm.
i personally believe if I've made a choice to do something, I have this like incessant need to be congruent and enjoy it. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I've chosen to record a podcast every week. That's not on anyone else. No company is telling me to do that. I've chosen to do it.
Yeah.
So I have to do it, and I have to love doing it. So
Yeah.
it's one of these things where like you've made that choice to pursue jujitsu, pursue a work from home. And because of that autonomy of choice, it makes you enjoy it more. You're not forced to do any of that other stuff, which is a very empowering feeling.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. And it's like, work is, for me, I don't consider things that I'm really into, like, and having fun with as like work. Like you're saying, like you're doing what you want, you're flowing, you're in the flow state basically. And it's funny, like, I don't know, we don't need to harp on this for too long, but right now I'm studying a whole bunch of stock trading and like reading these books on like price action and getting very technical, which is, hopefully going to be another thing in my future. But it's funny, like I'll catch myself like, at nighttime, like when my buddies are drinking beers and chilling, like I still might have had a beer or something, hanging out, but then I'll start cracking open this book and reading it. And it's all this very technical stuff. And it's sort of weird to me, but it's like, it's fun, it's like, if it's fun, do it, if you don't like it, I don't know, maybe do it, maybe not.
I had that exact. I learned this when I was in college. So I took an economics course and I loved it. I had never
Uh-huh.
liked a single course I'd ever taken in school until that point.
Yeah.
And I got my first A I think I'd ever gotten in that economics course. And I was like, wow, like I can be good at this if I actually care about it. And so there was
Yeah.
this progression where I started taking classes I cared about more. And then I started tricking myself into liking a lot of these other subjects more. And I completely transformed my academic career. And it's one
Yeah.
of these things where like, there's so much power in that. Is like, if you can convince yourself in some way that you're doing it for fun,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Then
going
the
to
effort
just do it better.
required to go into it is so much less. Like it just comes
Yep.
naturally.
Exactly.
Yeah, man.
Exactly. So let's change gears just a little bit here. I really want to learn more about the intersection of jujitsu and data in your life. So it's obviously intersected in terms of the work style and work life that you've chosen. Are there any other places where these two fields collide?
For sure. So it's funny actually, like just to start out, I feel like every segment here I'm giving a little background info, but
No, I love
yeah,
it.
I gotta fill in the gaps. So it's sort of funny because up until 3 years ago, that's about when I started competing more so in jujitsu, even though I've been training for about like maybe 11 years. It's been a while. Shit, maybe 12. It's 2022, I guess, 12 years. But so for the longest time, like I would, like in high school and college, like I would just go to jujitsu. I wouldn't really think too much about like what I'm doing. I would just show up, I'd roll, I'd have fun. I'm a bigger guy, I'm 6'5". I wasn't as heavy as I was back then as I am now, but I could sort of get away with forcing things a little bit. I wouldn't be the most technical. So I'd show up, I'd roll, I'd sweat, have fun, talk to the buddies and go home, not think about it too much. But now as I've getting more and more, into higher level competitions, I'm like getting very aware of my game and like analytical and what I'm good at, what I need to work on, what my opponents are good at, things like that. Whereas before there was none of that. Like it's funny, I was telling you, I've been an analytical person my whole life. Like I like to know why things happen and how, but jujitsu was like an outlier. Like I just didn't even think about it. I would just show up, just go and just come back. I wouldn't even know what I did. I would just be like lost. So now that I'm like coming into more, the higher level competition, it really is like it takes measured practice to get better at things, which is the same thing as, data analysis. So it's like, say for example, we're working with some new function and like, a MySQL program or something. Like you might not know how to use it at first. You'll see the function, you'll see like what inputs you're supposed to put here, and then like example of output data. Then you'll look through examples maybe of, what happens when I plug in these variables, what does it give me? And then you start messing with it on your own until you sort of figure it out. So it's sort of that measured practice where you have to be aware of what you're working with and cognizant of, what's happening. Why am I getting this error? Let's dive into the error and then figure it out, which always came natural to me in math and, SQL when starting out. And it's the same with jujitsu. It's like, if I'm working, say for example, like for a while, I was deficient in leg locks. Unfortunately, that's still how I lost that match on the Who's Next show. But I'd like to think I'm a lot better at them even now, 7 months later. That was like in early November that we filmed that. But so it's like, okay, I need to work on leg locks. Let's watch videos on it. Let's see what the best guys are doing. And then once I have a better idea of what's going on, let me put myself in that position over and over and over again and think about what I'm doing. Once I get out of it, if I got caught, let's think about what happened. If I caught the other guy, if I reverse him, let's think about what happened. Uh, like it's just measured practice really in both aspects. Like you have to be aware of what you're working with, and you can't just like plug and chug and just smash on the keyboard and hope it's going to work out. It's like, okay, we got to dive into this issue. And same with obviously jujitsu, things like, journaling help. I just write down a ton of stuff throughout all aspects of my life these days. And yeah, it's the repetition, but not just mindless repetition. You got to be paying attention.
So it seems like the deliberate practice is a key in pretty much any success anywhere, and that's coming from you, who's one of essentially like the best in the world at jiu-jitsu, which I think is a really powerful thing. As a data analyst, as a data scientist, right? Like I'm not at the pinnacle of the career. There's maybe at best I'm like an 85th percentile data scientist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very different mindset that you have to take into competition at the highest level versus like your work, which is almost never going to be at the highest level in this domain. And I
For
think
sure.
a big differentiator there is execution, right? So in jiu-jitsu, in any high level sport, there's a point where you have to detach from analysis, and you have to essentially, like when you compete, you have to forget about the analysis and just compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
You build the analysis into the practice and the repetition and the deliberate practice so that you're completely free to just execute when you're in the moment and when you're there.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have a parallel to that in the workforce because
I
we
was
can
just about
always.
to say that. That's a very good point, because in SQL and data analysis, it's like you can all the times, like you can take your time, you can think through this, you can refer back to your notes. Obviously, like you're saying, and sorry to cut you off, in jujitsu, that's not the case. It's like it's that deliberate practice that puts it in your mind. And I think Miyamoto Musashi says something where it's like if your mind is in one place, you can freeze, things like that. So you got to keep your mind empty. Your mind's got to be nowhere so that it can be everywhere. It's not quite the case in data analysis, but at least, yeah, the learning process is there. But then I guess, yeah, in data analysis, you're not going and freaking having a data off with the guy on the other, company. So it's a little different. Maybe if there was a big competition, actually, that would get into play. But the fact that there's no time constraints, there's no instant wins or losses, yeah, you don't need to deal with that as much in the data sector.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess in theory, like technical interviewing, that could be relevant, and that's where
Yeah, that's true.
you want to get to that point where you can just execute. I mean, I ran into this issue when I was playing competitive golf, is that I would overanalyze, right? Like
Uh,
I love jujitsu because it's dynamic. In golf, you go from a static position to hitting a ball, so there's a lot of time for you to think
oh,
about
man,
everything that could go right or wrong when you're over the shot.
for
But
sure.
if you're doing that when you're competing in jujitsu, that time is really important. There's that lapse, and you're going to get choked.
You cannot freeze up. You cannot think really. Like it's like, okay, I'm in this position. Should I go here or should I go here? And then before you know it, he's cranking on your foot. Your knee fucking pops or freaking pops. Sorry, didn't mean to cuss. And then you're out.
That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
For,
yeah.
it's funny actually. Speaking of golf, man, I just want to say this real quick. Yesterday I was hitting with my dad and I was putting, and I was on fire. I was just like making all these putts, like two putting everything, no matter how far it was. It was crazy. And then my dad starts bringing up, he's like, man, like you're clutch today, blah, 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 you're clutch. And then like our last putt of the day, I was just thinking, I was like, man, I am doing pretty good right now, huh? And then I screw up on the last one of the day. So it's like, yep, got to keep that mind empty.
It tends to happen. Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I will say I got really lucky, like moving from golf to doing a lot more jujitsu now, is because if I can keep thoughts out of my head over the course of, like a 10-15 second routine for a golf swing, I can do it when I'm on the mats fairly
Oh,
well,
for
which is
sure.
like which is like a
No,
very
man, that's
nice
good.
parallel.
Yeah, you got less time to think in jujitsu. So if you got minutes to think in golf and you can keep it quiet, then dealing with a 5 second intermission in a position is a little easier to come by.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something I found really interesting. I mean, I'm training mostly gi right now. So
Mm-hmm.
for those who don't know, you have generally like two ways you can compete in jiu-jitsu is in a gi, which is like a more traditional martial arts uniform, or no-gi, where you're in essentially like a rash guard, or you're in like more traditional tight-fitting street clothes. And in gi, you have a lot more time to think because you're in these stalemates, you're kind of moving a little bit slower. And it's like, for me, that's a lot easier to learn because I still can think a little bit and I can slowly limit the amount of time that I'm thinking till it becomes natural. Very hard for me to do in no-gi though.
Yeah, yeah, you'll get there. The gi is a good way to start, though, for sure. You're right. Slows things down because yeah, like as Ken was saying, like in the gi, you can actually grab onto the clothes. So it's like if a guy has a sleeve, you can grab the sleeve, and it's a little slower to come by. So yeah, more time to think out there.
This episode is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that Z workstations can come standard with Linux, and they can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right to work doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. So you mentioned something a little bit before about dedicated practice, but what other things can someone in the data space learn from jiu-jitsu, and maybe someone in the jiu-jitsu space learn from a data practitioner?
Yeah, so it's probably just a lot of like I mean learning anything is a skill, you know. It's like learning how to learn is, you know, something that some people haven't, you know, had to do before. So it's good to know how to learn things, especially if you approach something that, you know, you're very unfamiliar with. Like for example, like I remember looking at my first, like I was saying, in that second internship I had where I learned a little bit about SQL and how to pull data. I remember like seeing like it was like a data pull with like 100 inner joins, and it was like this was going on and that was going on. And I just looked at it and I was like, what the heck? I do not know what I'm looking at. But you can sort of break things down piece by piece once you gain like the familiarity to get there. So I think with anything that's pretty analytical, it's just like learning how to see something that you're not so sure about in the beginning, but then having confidence that you can get there to learn it, which was the case for me, for example, like in my math major at Cal Poly SLO, uh, like in some of these more theoretical math classes, I remember I'd just be sitting through a lecture and after 50 minutes, the class is over. I'm like, wow, I just do not know what was just said. I didn't understand any of that. Like, what the heck? And then, but luckily that would happen on a regular basis. So once I saw that whole lecture and didn't know what happened, coming back to it and having the confidence to break it down and understand reading the textbook, I was like, okay, if I see something that I don't get, it's like, I have confidence that I can learn how to do it. So I guess that's another parallel probably in data and jiu-jitsu is like, in jiu-jitsu, for example, if some guy's going for a heel hook, the guy who's getting heel hooked counters and uses a berimbolo to take the back. It's like that whole string of that whole sentence I just said probably would just like blow
Go over a
most
lot of
people's
people's
minds away, even if they know a little bit about jiu-jitsu. But once you learn what is a leg lock, what is a heel hook, what is a back take, what is a berimbolo, how does that lead to the back, then it's like you can sort of piece things together. So I'd say that's another good parallel. It's not specific, like we said, the deliberate practice. These things maybe aren't specific to jujitsu and to data analysis, but there's parallels in learning everything, you know. So it's you know, the confidence to see something that's not understood and turn it into something that you do understand.
I think something that's common in jiu-jitsu as well as any data analytic or any career really is jargon, and just learning to break those things down. Like for example, berimbolo, if you look how it's spelled, it doesn't exactly look like how it sounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of things, a lot of moves that are named after people essentially, and it suggests nothing about what the actual moves are. And so
Yeah.
going and googling these things, and like if you hear it, just Google it. Like that
Yeah.
happens so often when I'm looking through code. I'm like, what is this library do? I've never seen this before. I'll just Google it. I'm like, oh, I understand that now. Like I've seen
Uh-huh.
this now. I know what they're talking about, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, I haven't done something. I mean, jujitsu is still very new to me, but it's unbelievably exciting when I learn about something, and I hear someone talking about it, and now I'm part of that conversation because I
Yeah,
understand the concepts that are going on. I've seen it before. I'm like more aware of the world that's being built out there.
for
Um,
sure. It gives you confidence, man. You're like, okay, I know what
yeah,
these guys are saying. Like, it's like I heard this word before, I didn't get it. Now it's like we're learning. And yeah, shout out to one of my buddies that I train with at Legion American Jiu Jitsu, my buddy Mike Salazar. He sort of turned me on to the whole Barambolos and what they are, even in No-Gi. I didn't even know him up until like he came here like about a year ago. It's funny, man. So yeah, it's, I had been doing jujitsu for what, probably 11 years at that point, and I didn't even like really get it, And but then I was like, okay, let's just work through it. And now it's like whenever I hit one, I just love it, And like I'll see people setting them up. I can see it coming from a mile away when they're trying to do it to me. So yeah, it's just fun to learn.
well, I mean, that's the other part of it too. Is like when you see it, or when you actually do it, or when you execute it. Let's say like a query or your code runs, right? Or you hit a move in practice, like in an actual role. That's so exciting. The excitement you get there is so much. It's so worth it compared to the initial fear that you feel about approaching something that's new and intimidating,
For
right?
sure. I think that's how we grow. If it intimidates you to start, it's like, okay, let's figure it out. Then we'll grow from there.
Yeah. Well, you also have these lasting effects, right? I mean, I still look back on some of the things that I've done in my career, whether it's like making the decision to like try and pursue playing golf professionally, right? I didn't succeed, but I still like went out and I did it. I went
Yeah,
back. I look at going and like doing a master's in computer science when I had no coding background. To me, that's like, hey, if I was able to do that, I can learn how this freaking Python library works,
exactly.
right?
It's like it gives you confidence to learn more,
Yeah,
Like it's like, oh, if I can learn that, then like the possibilities are endless,
yeah.
Just keeps
Well,
going.
well, it's funny. I did my first jujitsu competition, and then 2 weeks later, I gave my first keynote speech.
Hmm.
And I kept thinking, I was like, wow, I was so much more nervous for the jujitsu competition than I am speaking in front of like 400 or 500 people. And if I could make it through that competition, then I can approach this and like be comfortable out there. And like in one, you're literally like fearing for your physical health. In another, it's like, okay, I embarrassed myself. Who cares, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. It does make other things a little bit easier, right?
yeah.
That's funny.
Uh, something that we talked a little bit about before, which I wanted to make sure we brought up, is this idea of unconscious resolution. So the idea that you're putting in a lot of the hard work in any of these things, in jujitsu, in coding practice, in SQL, whatever it might be, and sometimes it just needs to have a little bit of time to to like to work, but it eventually
Yeah.
does. Can you touch on that a little bit?
For sure, man. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I forgot like to mention that probably in the similarities between SQL and and data analysis and jujitsu. Because it's crazy, man. And I think I mentioned this to you before. I think it's from Stephen Pressfield's book. What is it? The War on Art. He
The war of
touches on
art. Yeah, yeah.
something. Touches on something about how basically you got to commit yourself to a task, and if you commit yourself hard enough with as much intent, like I think he refers to them as like, what was it, angels, or I forget exactly the terminology he uses, but it's not a religious book, but he basically says like some higher power, once you commit yourself this hard to a certain skill set, getting better at things, you're going to commit yourself, and then maybe later on in the day, like say I'm trying to run this SQL query and I can't quite figure it out, like it's just driving me nuts, and then it's like really in my brain though, like I'm really trying to figure it out, but I can't do it. Sometimes the best thing to do is just sit on it and let your unconscious brain sort of resolve the issues on its own, which is another reason why having jujitsu in the middle of the day for me is good, because sometimes I'll be stressing in the morning trying to figure out some coding stuff for work, and then as I'm driving to jujitsu, I'm not even thinking about it. Then out of nowhere, I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot to convert this variable over to this right format, or it's like I'm not grouping by like all the things I should be, or this or that. It's like it just sort of pops into your head. So it's being passionate about these things and working towards these goals. It's obviously hard work is a lot of what it takes, but then also like pulling back and sort of just allowing like your hard work to sort of set in to your subconscious mind can figure things out. Like, man, it's funny. Like a few weeks ago, one of my buddies was visiting, who I was training with, and then we were going over some stuff, and then I got sick for a few days where I couldn't train. So I was just thinking about jujitsu more than usual because I'm not actually doing it. And I'm not trying to think about it, but it's like I'm just have like these like pictures in my mind of like key little details on what I should try when I get back. You know, it's like, oh, on the berimbolo against this, leg attack, like keep my knee pinched on their thigh more so than in their hip because it's going to allow better rotation of their legs to slip in the far side hook. Sorry, non-jiu-jitsu people, you have no idea what I just said there, but but it's just putting a lot of effort into things. And then that's a similarity, I guess, again, not just with data analysis or jiu-jitsu, but with anything. It's like you put in the work, you put in the effort. Maybe it's in your off time that just randomly like the answer is going to pop into your head that you've been looking for. And yeah, it's easier that way than stressing about it for 20 hours straight. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite stories related to that, I mean, it's about a golfer, Gary Player. So he's like hitting sand shots, right? And he holds one out, and then he holds another out, and a guy watching him, he says, "Wow, that was really lucky." And Gary Player says, "The more I practice, the luckier I get."
I love
Right?
that one. Yeah.
And the idea is that, if you're putting in the work, you will see dividends, but it doesn't have to be like immediate, right? All
Mm-hmm.
of the good fortune, all the good things that happen, there is some randomness involved, but you're moving the probability distribution, the positive outcomes slightly over to increase those. And the better you get in that domain, the more likely you're going to have good opportunities. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they're all going to rain on you. It just means they're more likely, and they'll probably come pretty unexpectedly. And I think we're
Yeah.
so used to this immediate payoff
Mm-hmm.
that we get discouraged if something doesn't happen immediately, and things just don't happen immediately unless you're really lucky.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. It's funny. It's like a lot of times, like the time in like jujitsu or mixed martial arts or even maybe data analysis, I'm sure like there's, people who come into the spotlight what seems to be very quickly to everyone else, and they're like an overnight success. But it's like that probably wasn't overnight. This guy's probably putting in work for years, and then like finally the opportunity comes, and then he just strikes it. Like you're saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. It's like, yeah, I still get lucky in training, but I get lucky a lot more than I did 8 years ago. It's like, is it luck? I don't know, maybe, but probably not just luck. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really important point there too, is that success and personal growth, and it isn't necessarily linear. So let's take Berimbolo for you, for example. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
you hadn't been using it and you integrate it to your game. It fits your body type very well. Like, you have long legs, you have, like, I would imagine you can invert pretty well. It seems like it would probably fit. That might transform your jujitsu game completely, right? If that becomes a major staple of it, that could transform you. Like, that could give you a huge leap if that's something you'd never been really using before. Same
Yeah.
thing in data analysis. I start learning like Python or some dashboarding tool, and I fall in love with it, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
get really good at it, and that's all I want to do. That like transforms the nature of my work. That might open me up to a lot of job opportunities. It might change the way I approach things. This new framework might leap, make me leap forward very far, um, just because I had access to it and I was working on things parallel to it. It's sort of that randomness of finding the thing that fits into your bigger system that makes you improve. And so many people think it's like, oh, I just work day after day and I get better. It's like, no, there are these other things, like, that you specifically work on that can sort of supercharge something. And yes, maybe there's some luck in finding those specific things, but I also think there's some introspection and understanding who you are and what your game is and what you like that can lead to that monumental progress as well.
For sure, man. And I just want to throw out there a side note for everyone watching, in case you're wondering what a berimbolo is. The spelling, as Ken mentioned earlier, it's sort of tricky to spell. It's Berimbolo. So go ahead and YouTube it, and then maybe you'll understand a little bit more about all this berimbolo talk. because yeah, it's a funky one. But yeah, man, that's another great point as well. It's yeah, the links are undeniable for sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking about those links, I mean, I obviously have fallen in love with jujitsu. I mean, it's something I train about 4 times a week. It's something I like. I look forward to it every single day I go and train. Um, but from a more advanced practitioner, why might it be worthwhile to pursue jujitsu, just recreationally or anything along those lines? I find that there have been some incredible like benefits to me, but I'm interested in your perspective, especially for a lot of the data scientists, data analysts, software engineers who are sitting at home quite a bit.
I was just gonna say specifically. Okay, I'll start out specifically catering to the data crowd, and then I'll expand more so broadly. Uh, it's funny, man. In jujitsu, you wouldn't think so. A lot of people might see like jujitsu and this and that as like a meathead type thing, which sure it is. It can be. It's like we're wrestling, we're trying to submit each other and choke each other out. You'd be very surprised in jujitsu how many data guys there are, how many stats guys there are, math guys, scientists. Like it's like a very like there's a technical crowd. Of course, there's guys of all different, occupations. I'm not saying it's like all data now and analysts doing jujitsu, but you'd be surprised, honestly, how many like technically minded people there are. So it's funny. So that sort of fits in right away. As we mentioned before, the technical analysis required to understand data issues and things like that. You learn to break things down piece by piece and see what's going wrong. The same pattern of solution identification basically can be implemented into jujitsu. You can break down your issues very technically if you want, or you could be like me, how I was prior to 3 years ago, where you just show up, roll, sweat, go home. But since this is a data savvy crowd, I'm sure if anyone hadn't done jujitsu and got into it and got hooked within 2 or 3 months, they'd be like you, thinking about it in the off time, thinking about these positions to work on, fixing their issues, just because it's fun. It's like human chess basically when it comes down to it. And then so I actually wrote down a short little list to answer this one because I didn't want to forget anything. I knew you were going to ask this question. Everything else is off the top, and this basically all is too. I wrote this like 2 minutes before our video. So health, obviously, exercise is good for a human being, whether it's physical, health, even mental health. You gotta get your blood pumping. It's we're animals. We gotta work our biological system. We can't just sit at a computer all day. Otherwise, our back's gonna hurt, and unhealthy
Can
things are
relate.
gonna happen. Yeah, exactly. So it's a healthy way. It's a little bit more fun than just going to the gym and lifting weights or throwing on earbuds and paving away at the road, which both are actually fun to me. But a lot of people who aren't as excited for exercise might not take to those as much. So it's healthy, it's fun, it's a social circle. When I'm sure as well as I do, your gym that you go to, you see the same people all the time. You talk to them, say what's up, see what they've been up to, and then you casually try to strangle each other and wrench on each other's arms, and then afterward it's sort of, you just feel like a better person. I don't know, you guys are chatting after the class, you're all tired, sitting there exhausted, sweaty, and before you know it, you've chatted for like 30 minutes and you're like, crap, I got to get out of here. So it's a good social event. You're building friends, having in a good positive environment. Anxiety relief for sure. Data analysis specifically can be a stressful job. Data science, anything among that nature, especially if you're in the deeper fields such as machine learning and things like that. I'm sure it's like stress is going to happen. So again, tying it into the health aspect, it's stress relief, which again in turn is healthy for you. So you can get rid of that if you're like I said, you're slamming on your keyboard trying to figure out why you're getting this error. Maybe just on the way to driving to jiu-jitsu, it'll pop into your brain and figure it out. Maybe not. Maybe just by going to jiu-jitsu at least will alleviate the anxiety that you built up through the day not getting us to work. You're sort of relieved after. You can go hang out, relax, and feel good. Okay, this is something we touched on when we had our initial conversation, which is a really good point, and it's really good for, especially in this modern day and age, it really keeps you in the moment. Because like if you're in jiu-jitsu, if you're rolling with someone, grappling, you can't really be thinking about too much else. Otherwise things won't go great for you. And trust me, I've been there. Sometimes I'm like, sort of like getting messages from my manager or something on the side as I'm training. And then I'm like, I just don't do good because my mind's not focused. Luckily, I've gotten better at blocking that out. But so you're in the moment, you're immersed. Like, it's not many times in today's day and age, where like, we got our cell phones all the time. It's easy to get distracted. We're scrolling on Instagram. You're just like always thinking about all these different things, basically. And then, so basically it'll just help keep you in the moment there, for sure. And yeah, you just, can block other things out a little bit easier. And then other more, reasons that might stick out to someone right off the bat is self-defense. You can learn how to defend yourself in case you're ever in a situation where, things are going wrong and you got to protect yourself. Of course, hope that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, speaking bluntly here, especially for females, knowing jiu-jitsu is a very good skill for self-defense too, because of course you don't want to bring it up, but sexual assault is a thing. And you learn to use your legs as weapons when in jiu-jitsu. It's like if some guy's in your guard between your legs, you can go ahead and, punch their wrist down and get them in a triangle choke with your legs. And yeah, man, I just rattled off a whole bunch there, but as you can tell, there's many reasons to sell someone on it. There's too many benefits, and, drawbacks are unfortunately injuries. It's part of it. So, you can
Obsession and time consumption is another.
Exactly. Obsession for sure, man. It takes time, but yeah, man, there's ton of reasons, to go ahead and get started in it.
Yeah. I mean, one I definitely want to add is that I think training is something that helps you deal with adversity. We touched on this a little bit before, but to me, it's so important to like condition yourself to get over or to do hard things. Like something I write down or I try to do every day is I try to do at least one thing that I perceive as difficult so that it just makes other things seem less difficult.
Yeah,
Right? If I sit in an ice tub for 5 minutes, that makes me writing, 10 lines of code pretty easy in comparison.
for
And the same
sure.
thing with jiu-jitsu, you're doing something physically taxing, mentally stimulating, that's difficult. And it sucks in the beginning. A lot of people tend to quit because they get beat up on a little bit, especially to start. But that's sort of the fun of it is you see the people who've been doing it for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, and you see the difference in the skill, and you're like, wow, like that's a place that I could potentially be if I continue to invest and to grow and kind of take these whoopings just a little bit. And that to me is something that I've always really relished, is that if we get through the hard stuff, it makes the next difficult thing we do far easier. And then
Yeah.
pretty soon, like almost anything will seem easy for us if we've done enough hard things.
Like you said, presenting in front of a couple hundred people is a lot easier after you go through a tournament where some guy's trying to, crank your face and things like that. So yeah, doing hard things makes other things easier. I agree completely. And the ice bath, yet again, I know we talked about that before. Key part of my staple of my routine as well. That same type of thing, man. You learn to sit through that, then 5 minutes anywhere else is a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, out of curiosity, what temperature do you usually try to get the ice bath to, or you just
Yeah.
throw some ice in it? And
No, so I've got a chest freezer that I converted. So I put it on, a power outlet basically to freeze it for like 4 hours at
I
night
do
or
the
so.
exact same thing.
Yeah, cool, perfect. So the way I know when it's cold enough is when there's giant ice chunks that I have to break to get into it. So I've taken the temperature before, and it's about 34 degrees or so under there. So I try to get it as cold as I can. Yeah, it's
I
yeah,
can't get in if it's less than like 45. That's too cold for me.
oh really, dude?
I'm soft.
It
Yeah.
seems easier for me. It's the weirdest thing actually. I've tried it without it like sort of being frozen on top, and like I don't know, for some reason like it almost like shuts off like some nervous system or something when I get in when it's real cold. I don't know. Hopefully it's a good thing. I don't know. All I know is that I've gotten in it before when it like wasn't fully frozen, and I was like, wow, this is a lot harder to deal with. But that was only a few times, and now it's always just freezing. So maybe I just haven't done it in a while.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
I think I just need to toughen up a little bit. But
Uh,
uh, so I did want to touch on one thing. I mean, at the beginning, we obviously talked about how Who's Next didn't go exactly according to plan, and that's
mhm.
something, like dealing with that adversity. And I'm wondering a little bit about how you approach when things don't go to plan. How do you approach it? Those types of adversity. How do you create the mindset to get over them rather
Mhm.
than to just dwell on it? Because that's something that, again, is so common with people in the interview process that I see, right? Where, we're getting rejected by, 50, 60 jobs, and it's just devastating. But like, you still have to move on. You still have to progress. We touched on a little bit more, but I really want to dive into that and refine it a bit.
100%. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big bummer in the beginning, and it's hard to get around for sure. It's like I had been looking forward to that for like months. I knew it was going to happen probably 8 months ahead of time, and that I had a good shot of getting on to the show, and that like I was just looking forward to it. It was going to be like a week and a half off work, away from my day job, to where I could focus on jujitsu fully for the first time ever. And I've watched Ultimate Fighter growing up my whole life, and it's basically the jujitsu version of the Ultimate Fighter. So I was like, I was hyped to be on it. It was like a really good opportunity. And then, unfortunately, like the way things went down is so it's a no time limit submission only matches, and I think I was maybe the fifth or sixth match of the day. And I always had like a very strict routine going into my matches, and I'd need a certain hard warm up, and I need to eat this and eat that, and like I still like to get those things good if I can. But on that day, obviously it's no time limit matches, so it goes until one guy gets a submission. So we get there maybe 9 a.m. or something, and then like hours later, basically it's the match before mine. And then so I'm like, I'd already warmed up a once or so twice before then, and then once the match before mine's about to start, I'm like, okay, this should be a quick match. It's like a black belt versus a blue belt. I think let me warm up again. And then so I warm up again, I'm ready to go. And then I'm sort of sitting there just like trying to time the match when there's no like ability to. And it ended up being a match that lasted 3 hours long, which is really crazy and unexpected. And it's funny, actually, on the reality show, they edited the matches in a different order, probably just for viewers' sake. They didn't show that one, which was before mine. But that really threw me off too. And then I realized, like, by the time my match came around, I was sort of tired. I was flat. I'd been sitting around. I'd drink freaking 4 cups of coffee throughout the day, which I'd never done. I'm like coming down from the coffee. It's just like crazy. So, anyways, now that my excuses are out of the way for the poor performance, basically, I I look at things that go into the day, the preparation beforehand. So, and then technical wise, sort of. So I was thinking like, okay, what could I have done different leading up to the tournament? Like, maybe I was thinking like, maybe I got to just like put less emphasis on how cool this is going to be and how much I'm looking forward to it, and just try to move forward, more monotone and stoically, I guess. Like whether it's good or bad, just be normal. And then I look into like, what did I do wrong the day of? I sort of break down like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have warmed up. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to time this. Maybe if anything, I should have just tried to get like a really quick warm up in when I knew it was my time to go. Maybe I should have. I basically find all those variables. And then, of course, we look at the technical aspect. It's like, okay, well, it's not all what went wrong beforehand. I obviously also screwed up on a technique somewhere along the way. So then it's like, okay, let me get this technical details ironed out. So it's like, for example, like the guy slapped my hand. He basically got a good grip, pulled me into his guard, and then went on a leg attack right away, which I'm usually good at countering, but sort of like in my head about how cool the situation was. And I got to win this match to get into the house. It was big pressure, and I'd warmed up a few times. So trying to, like we were talking about earlier, my mind should have been more empty. I think I had too much going on through my mind at that point. And then technical wise, like I said, he went into the leg attack, and then I got out of the first one. Then I sit back to my butt, and then I'm playing this thing that's called a knee shield guard, where my leg is sort of hanging out at an angle to where my opponent, if he wants, he can grab my leg and sit back to the ground and start attacking leg locks, and which is what he did. He tried a straight ankle, then switch it to an outside heel hook, and submitted me really quickly. So that was the technical aspect I had to break down. Is like, okay, maybe I got to not leave my leg hanging out there, not do this. So I try to be as objective as I can, whether it's the mental side of things or, the technique and things like that. And, just try to break down what went wrong and then try to, yeah, account for it in future trainings. So, putting myself in that position and escaping the leg lock a lot and showing up to training without, warming up and just jumping in there just to know I can do it, to have the confidence, oh, if I don't get my warm up, I'll be good. So yeah, filling in the gaps like that.
I really like the way that you just described that. I think something that people don't appreciate is that you can be objective about a lot of these things, right? Like what is in your control, what is outside of your control. And there's a lot of randomness that goes into everything. There's so much
For
randomness
sure.
that goes into a jiu-jitsu match. Like if you put the same two people up against each other 20 times, if they're of reasonable skill, you're going to get a distribution of
Yeah,
of of like wins and losses, right? Just what happened in that specific scenario.
for sure.
And I always use this example with the interview process is that people don't realize the probability that you get a callback from a cold uh, application of a for a data science job, just the callback is like 2%. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to essentially spend 50 emails or 50, not 50 emails, 50 applications before you get one response, like the
Yeah.
average. Right. And people
Uh-huh.
always say, oh, I sent out 20 and I didn't get any responses, or I got one response. You're like, well, you're actually doing like better than double the average. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
there is this like this baseline that people don't give themselves in like a quantitative way where they think they're doing a lot, they think they're doing bad, but in actuality, they're doing something that's good. And
For
the way you've described things, I think like there's no way you could have possibly known that there was going to be this long wait ahead of you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing things that were along with your process and whatever it might be, and it just so happened the other guy didn't approach it in the same way, that's not something you can fault yourself for. It's something you can prepare yourself for in a future thing. But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, is this really on me? Is this something I should super focus on? Or is this just the bad luck of the draw? And for some reason, humans have just such a tough time differentiating those things that I really believe that is like a legitimate superpower that we can develop is to say, okay, how much of this was on me? And how much of this on me that I can work on? And how much of this was this random, like, stuff that's in the ether that I didn't really have the ability to control?
Yeah.
Um, and,
For
and
sure.
yeah, of course, there's the slippery slope. There's a couple of professional golfers that I've seen where they're like, oh, like the course is in such garbage shape and all of this type of stuff. And it's like, dude, everyone's playing the same course. Like you
Yeah.
can't, that's not a good excuse. Right. Um,
Exactly.
but as long as you can like be honest with yourself and like, not make excuses for yourself, but say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is how it is. And this is what I had control over. And this is what I didn't have control over. That's something they can carry so far, whether it's in any sport or it's in your career, because I know I've had some of those issues where like things didn't go my way and I was blaming myself. And then someone
Yeah.
just talked to me and was like, is this really your fault? And I was like, no, because there is power in having that internal locus of control, right? Where it's like, I control my own destiny. When I succeed, it's because of me. And when I fail, it's because of me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's generally a good mindset to have, but you can really take it too hard and not be objective and be completely unproductive because of that too.
For sure, man. I think it's all about like, and also after that loss, I sort of, was trying to like reflect and figure out ways to improve myself in jujitsu and also outside of it. And started reading a little bit more, getting more into like stoicism and, the books I mentioned earlier, like The War of Art and things like that. Like, I guess some people call them self-help books, but it's just like, I just see it as like taking knowledge that other guys who are smart and accomplished have put forth and, absorbing it into my brain because it's sort of a cheat code to learn things. And so, yeah, and a major concept in like, stoicism is basically like focus on what you can control, and what you can't control. It's like, well, you can't really do anything about it anyways. Obviously it's easier said than done. But for example, that guy, complaining about the bad golf course or something, it's like, okay, yeah, it wasn't in my control that it was a bad golf course, but what is in my control? Maybe I should practice on a bad golf course so that I could get used to it, in case this situation ever happens again. So yeah, man, it's just take it down to what you can change and what you can't. What you can't, leave it. Don't stress. What you can, make a change or learn from it.
Amazing. Amazing. So I have one last question and then I'll let you go. Thank you for spending so much time with me here.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So from a quantitative perspective, I think the Jiu Jitsu belt system is very interested. I was wondering how you feel about that and if you think there should be some reform or, it's just one of the idiosyncrasies of the sport and it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. So it's funny, man, because like, yeah, the belt system, it's a very traditionalist approach. It's like in karate, there were belts, obviously in a lot of martial arts, there are belts to signify like your progress. How far, are you beginner? Are you an expert? Are you intermediate? What are you? Nowadays, so there's a few layers to this thing. So I think what the belt system really helps to do in jiu-jitsu as like a monetary system is to get people interested and like work towards their next belt, which will maybe keep them in the pipeline, spending more money because they want to see that progress. Like that, it's sort of like you know people, American people, any people really like working towards something and getting an accomplishment for it. So I guess it's like caters to that side of us, it's like an instant gratification type thing for a delayed gratification practice. So that's one thing. It keeps, and if that gets someone interested and if they stay in it and love it, so be it, maybe better off. But the belt system is a little bit funky these days because there's there's like, obviously like a blue belt guy who's wrestled his whole life might beat up some black belt guy because like he just, isn't used to dealing with the pressure that the guy's putting, or it's a different style or this or that. When in reality, you would think like, oh, he's a black belt. Shouldn't he just submit a blue belt easily? It's not always the case. For me too, for example, it's like speaking of the show, the guy who submitted me, his name's Big Dan. Luckily, he's gone on to win a bunch of stuff lately, and he's been doing really good. He won his way into like this biggest jiu-jitsu championship for no-gi there is. He's a blue belt, and I'm a brown belt. So like at the time, that like hurt my soul. I was like, what the hell? What just happened here? But then I'm seeing the kid crushing it, killing it now, and like it's he's not an ordinary blue belt, and anyone would say that, but it's up to the professor to give him the next rank. So the belt system's subjective in that sense. It's like, speaking about myself again, a lot of people, like, not trying to like toot my own horn or whatever, they'll be like, man, why aren't you a black belt yet? Blah, blah, blah. Like, you've been training this long. You're so, you're this good, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, one, I don't really care too much about it. I'm just, worried about getting better. But also I'm more, competitive. So someone who doesn't compete as much might get their black belt a little bit quicker because they're not representing their school against other black belts. Whereas, like I'm competing against all the hardest, toughest brown belts in the world, soon the black belts and stuff like that. So it's very subjective in that sense. It's divided like for competitors, for, more casual practitioners. And the final point about this is you only wear the belt in the gi. So that's, like as Ken mentioned earlier, he trains in the gi. So we wear the uniform, which other people call it a kimono. So that's like basically a robe. Then you put your belt around it to tie it on. And no-gi, you're not really even wearing the belt. And so it's not really a part of daily training. And also, belts are a lot less looked at in no-gi these days, especially in these bigger jiu-jitsu competitions. Like they'll have, for example, me. I was a blue belt, or I was a brown belt going against a blue belt. There was another blue belt going against a black belt, which was the 3-hour match. So it's like, technically people wouldn't think it would last 3 hours. So it's a very subjective thing, man. I think it's the belt system somewhat unnecessary, but I see it. I see why it's there as a traditional system and also just to keep people hooked for the next, ranking or whatever. But if you're, if you're getting into it, just don't think that the belt is the end all be all for someone's skill. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I think from a purely like analytical perspective, I've always struggled with it. It's like there's no clear qualifications. It's hard to say, hey, I want to do these specific things to level up in the next, to continue and to progress.
Uh-huh.
And some schools obviously have that, but there isn't this like uniform thing. And in
Hmm.
competition, it's like, well, someone can be a blue belt that's been training for forever, and just because their professor didn't promote them, they could just be shredding everyone. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I haven't been promoted, so I'm still in this category. And it's like, well,
Sandbagging, they call it.
exactly,
Exactly.
yeah,
Guys want to win those competitions, so they'll keep a guy back, and yeah, it's funny. Like me, I've been like, submitting black belts in training since I was like a blue belt. So, it's like not all of them, obviously. Like I'm saying, everyone's different. It just depends on the person. So yeah, man, it's not the most objective qualification, that's for sure.
yeah. Well, I still think it's fun. I mean, I really agree with you on the no-gi front, where it's like, hey, there are these larger buckets that you can fall into, and if you're shredding
Mhm.
people, just move up.
For sure.
And it's a pretty great system. So,
For
Braylor,
sure.
this was awesome. Thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to share? I definitely would love to have people be able to reach out or learn more about you in any way
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me on. First podcast I've done, so thank you for that. We're learning here. We're figuring it out. Yeah, and if anyone here wants to reach out, my Instagram is just my first. Well, it's actually my middle name, but my name here, Breylor. That's Breylor. I thanks for listening. If you guys listened all the way through, please let me know what you think of it. Like I said, I want to improve in ways. I want to see what people liked, maybe what just get some thoughts on it. So that'd be really cool. Um, Also, I'm competing on a pretty big event here coming up July 14th in Austin. It's going to be streamed on Flow Grappling for the finale of that Who's Next show, where unfortunately I had that crushing first round loss. Luckily, this is the redemption story to come. So I'm going against another guy who was kicked out first round, competing in a live event on the big stage. So that's going to be real fun. July 14th. It's streamed on flowgrappling.com. Uh, yeah, it's other than that, that's it, man. I'm just gonna be chugging away at jujitsu, data analysis, and freaking day trading research over here. So hit me
I
up if you
love
guys
it.
have any suggestions on any of that. Otherwise, thanks again, Ken. I really appreciate it.